Imagine planning a quiet walk through one of Europe's oldest forests. You arrive before sunrise. The air is cold. The trees are still. But something is wrong. A road that has always been open is now blocked by steel barriers. Bright police tape stretches from tree to tree. Officers stand silently beside their vehicles. No one is allowed through. People ask a simple question: what happened? No one receives an answer. The officers do not look frightened. They do not look angry. They simply repeat the same sentence. The forest is closed. No explanation follows. Within hours, photographs begin appearing online. Every entrance is blocked. Hiking trails have vanished behind fences. Even small dirt paths known only to local residents are guarded. The closure spreads across dozens of kilometers. Local newspapers report only that authorities are responding to an ongoing safety operation. Nothing more. That strange phrase quickly becomes the center of attention. What kind of safety operation requires sealing an entire forest? Residents begin comparing stories. One elderly man says he has lived beside the forest for 60 years. He has seen storms, wildfires, floods, and military exercises. Nothing has ever closed the forest completely. A woman who walks her dog there every morning says police arrived during the night. There were no sirens, no helicopters, no warning. By sunrise, everything had already changed. The silence feels unnatural. Journalists attempt to reach the area. Several news crews are stopped long before reaching the trees. Camera operators film rows of police vehicles disappearing into the mist. Questions are shouted across the barricades. Officials refuse interviews. Even drone operators trying to capture aerial footage report being ordered to leave. Curiosity spreads across social media. Some believe dangerous chemicals have leaked underground. Others suspect escaped prisoners. A few claim authorities discovered unexploded wartime weapons. Each theory sounds reasonable. None explain the level of secrecy. Then another strange detail appears. Forestry workers scheduled to enter the area suddenly have their permits canceled. Scientists studying local wildlife are told their research has been suspended indefinitely. Even maintenance crews repairing nearby roads receive new instructions. Stay away from the forest. No reason given. The surrounding villages begin changing. Hotels notice unexpected cancellations. Tourists drive for hours, only to find every entrance blocked. Shops lose customers. Local businesses suffer. Yet nobody complains publicly. Instead, people whisper, because something about the officers feels unusual. Witnesses later recall seeing exhausted faces, long shifts, sleepless eyes, vehicles entering the forest before dawn, returning after sunset, always covered in thick layers of mud, but no equipment, no captured animals, no visible evidence, just silence. Several days later, satellite images begin attracting attention online. Some users claim sections of the forest appear blurred. Others insist nothing has changed at all. Arguments spread across internet forums. Nobody can agree on what they are seeing. Then comes the first truly unsettling rumor. A local photographer claims he heard voices deep inside the forest during the night. Not shouting, not screaming, people calmly talking. Yet thermal cameras showed no one there. Police dismiss the story. Still, it refuses to disappear. More witnesses step forward. Someone reports strange lights moving between the trees after midnight. Another claims every bird suddenly stopped singing. A hunter says deer fled the forest days before the closure. Individually, these stories mean very little. Together, they begin forming a disturbing picture. Authorities continue repeating the same sentence. The forest remains closed. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. The barricades remain exactly where they were placed. Fresh police vehicles replace old ones. Security cameras appear along nearby roads. Motion sensors are quietly installed near hidden paths. Someone clearly expects people to keep trying to enter. The biggest mystery is no longer what happened inside. It is why officials refuse to say anything at all. Because history has shown that dangerous places are usually explained. Wildfires, floods, chemical spills, diseases, people are warned. Information is shared. But here, there is only silence. And silence often hides something far more frightening than the truth. As rumors spread across Europe, another story begins to surface. A rescue team had entered the forest shortly before it was sealed. Only one transmission from that team would ever become public. And according to those who heard it, nothing in the recording made sense. 3 days before the forest was sealed, the first emergency call arrived. A young camper had failed to return from a weekend hiking trip. His car was found in the main parking area. His backpack was missing. His phone stopped transmitting shortly after sunset. At first, nobody was concerned. Search and rescue teams respond to missing hikers every year. Most are found within hours. A wrong turn, a broken ankle, bad weather. This case looked no different. Just after sunrise, a 6-person rescue team entered the forest through the Eastern Trail. They carried GPS units, satellite radios, thermal cameras, medical kits, and enough supplies for 2 days. Their mission was simple: find the missing camper. The first hour went exactly as expected. Radio updates were calm. Trail conditions normal. No unusual activity. We're following fresh footprints. The command center logged every transmission. Then, something changed. One rescuer reported that the GPS route no longer matched the trail beneath their feet. According to the device, they were standing several hundred meters away from their actual position. Technicians blamed a temporary signal error. The team continued. A few minutes later, another rescuer reported the same problem. Then another. Every GPS unit displayed different coordinates. Yet the team was still walking together. Command instructed them to stop and verify their position using traditional maps and compasses. That should have solved everything. Instead, the confusion became worse. The lead rescuer calmly reported that 2 compasses were pointing in completely different directions. The command center asked him to repeat himself. He did. No one had an explanation. Despite the equipment failure, the team decided to continue toward the camper's last known location. Their voices remained professional, disciplined, confident. Until the next transmission. We found footprints. The dispatcher asked for details. There was a long pause. Then the reply came. They don't make sense. The footprints appeared fresh. Only one set. They crossed soft ground for nearly 50 meters. Then, they simply ended. There was no rock, no stream, no fallen tree, nothing that could hide where the person had gone. The final footprint stopped in the middle of wet soil. Beyond it, nothing. The dispatcher assumed the rescuer was mistaken. He ordered the team to search the surrounding area. Minutes passed. No response. Finally, the radio came alive again. But the voice sounded different. Quieter. Slower. One rescuer whispered that they kept hearing movement behind them. Every time they stopped, the sound stopped too. Another rescuer interrupted. He insisted no one was following them. The forest was completely empty. The command center instructed everyone to remain together. A routine safety order. No one argued. For nearly 20 minutes, radio traffic became normal again. Position updates, weather reports, battery levels. Then one message froze everyone listening. I can see someone between the trees. The dispatcher immediately asked if it was the missing camper. There was another pause. No. Then who is it? Silence. The transmission remained open. Wind could be heard. Leaves moving. Heavy breathing. Finally, one sentence broke through the static. They're just standing there. Command demanded a description. Height, clothing, distance. No answer. Instead, another voice entered the transmission. A second rescuer. There isn't anyone here, the first rescuer argued immediately. Yes, there is. I can see them. The second rescuer insisted he was looking in the exact same direction. There was nothing there. The command center realized 2 people standing side by side were describing completely different scenes. The situation was becoming impossible. Orders were given. Abort the search. Return immediately. The team acknowledged the command. Their voices sounded relieved. They began retracing their route. Or at least, they believed they did. 40 minutes later, they still had not reached the forest entrance. Radio operators noticed something disturbing. Every location update placed the team farther from the exit, not closer. The rescuers insisted they were walking downhill toward the road. The GPS showed the opposite. Then the radios filled with static. One final clear transmission came through. We're back where we started. The dispatcher checked the map. That was impossible. The team had been walking for nearly an hour. There was no route that could return them to the same location without anyone noticing. The rescue leader spoke one last time. His voice had completely changed. No confidence. No certainty. Only confusion. We don't think we're alone anymore. The transmission ended. No goodbye. No emergency code. Just silence. Every attempt to contact the team failed. Additional rescue crews were prepared, but before they entered the forest, someone much higher in the chain of command issued a different order. No one goes in. By sunrise the next morning, police had sealed every entrance to the forest, and the missing rescue team was never officially mentioned again. The disappearance of the rescue team should have triggered the largest search operation the region had ever seen. Instead, the opposite happened. The forest grew quieter. Roadblocks became permanent. More officers arrived. Fewer questions were answered. Official statements never mentioned the rescue team by name. They only referred to an ongoing investigation. Families were told very little. Reporters received identical responses. Local officials refused interviews. The silence became part of the mystery. Even so, small pieces of information slowly escaped. A forestry employee claimed investigators had recovered several abandoned items near the center of the restricted zone. A backpack, a flashlight, a first aid kit, a broken radio antenna. Nothing unusual by themselves. But every item was found within a few meters of the others, as if someone had carefully placed them on the ground before walking away. There were no signs of panic, no torn clothing, no blood, no struggle. The scene looked strangely organized. Search specialists found footprints around the equipment. At first, everything seemed normal. Boot prints from the rescue team, fresh impressions in damp soil. Then the trail did something investigators could not explain. The prints simply stopped. Not gradually, not on rocky ground, not near a river. The last clear footprint ended in soft earth. Beyond it, nothing. Experienced trackers searched the area for hours. There were no return tracks, no animal prints crossing the path, no drag marks, no hidden trail. It looked as though the person had taken one final step, vanished. That discovery remained unofficial, but another detail was confirmed by multiple people who had worked near the forest. The trees themselves appeared damaged, not by storms, not by machinery. Long, narrow marks covered the bark of dozens of trunks. Some cuts were shoulder height. Others reached far above any person's head. Forestry experts reportedly examined them. None publicly identified their cause. As photographs circulated online, theories exploded. Some believed the marks came from heavy equipment. Others suggested lightning. A few insisted they resembled enormous claw marks. No explanation satisfied everyone. Then wildlife experts noticed something even stranger. Animals had disappeared. Birdsong became unusually rare near the sealed zone. Deer avoided their normal migration routes. Trail cameras that once captured foxes, wolves, and wild boar suddenly recorded nothing. Days passed without a single large animal appearing on camera. For a healthy forest, that was deeply unusual. Researchers searched for environmental causes, disease, poison, noise pollution. None matched the evidence. Then came the cameras. Police had quietly installed motion-activated cameras along several restricted paths. According to a technician who later spoke anonymously, the cameras worked perfectly during testing, until they faced deeper into the forest. Every few nights, recordings ended the same way. No warning, no visible interference. The image froze. Static filled the screen. Then the file corrupted completely. The equipment itself showed no damage. The memory cards were intact. Yet the final seconds of footage were always unreadable. The failures became so common that replacement cameras were installed. The new systems behaved exactly the same. One technician reportedly joked that the forest didn't like being photographed. Nobody laughed. Soon after, drone teams were brought in. Unlike search crews on foot, drones could cover large areas quickly. The first flights appeared successful. Live video streamed clearly back to the operators. Tree canopy, open clearings, rock formations. Everything looked ordinary. Then, during one afternoon mission, a drone reached the center of the restricted zone. Its altitude suddenly dropped. The video shook violently. The signal began breaking apart. Operators assumed mechanical failure. But the flight logs later showed something unexpected. The drone had never reported an engine problem. It simply stopped responding. When another drone was sent to locate it, that aircraft also disappeared from the live map for several minutes before reappearing far from its planned route. Both drones eventually returned. Neither carried useful footage from the missing minutes. The recordings contained only digital noise. Officials dismissed the incidents as technical glitches. Engineers were less convinced. Back in the nearby villages, stories continued to spread. One hunter claimed he heard heavy footsteps circling his cabin late at night. Another resident reported seeing bright lights weaving silently between the trees. A truck driver passing the forest after midnight described rows of powerful floodlights deep inside the restricted area. He insisted they were far too bright to belong to ordinary search crews. Authorities denied operating any nighttime excavation, yet more witnesses began reporting the same lights. Some said they vanished the moment anyone tried to approach. Others claimed they were never there at all. The contradictions only made the mystery stronger. Then, an image appeared online. It showed several large military-style vehicles parked near one of the closed entrances. Within hours, the photograph disappeared from multiple websites. No explanation was given. If the picture was fake, why remove it? And if it was real, why were military vehicles entering a forest that officials insisted was simply closed for public safety? The investigation was about to take an unexpected turn. Because the next witnesses would not be hikers. They would be people who claimed to have seen a secret operation unfolding in the darkness. By the second month, the story had almost disappeared from national news. Television channels stopped covering it. Newspapers moved on. Official updates became shorter and less frequent. To the outside world, the forest was simply a restricted area. But for the people living nearby, something had changed. The nights were no longer quiet. Several residents reported hearing the sound of heavy engines long after midnight. Large vehicles traveled roads that had been closed to the public. No headlights, only small convoy lights glowing through the fog. One farmer claimed he counted 8 trucks entering the forest in a single night. None returned before sunrise. At first, people assumed the police were transporting equipment. Then a retired truck driver noticed something unusual. The vehicles were larger than standard police transports. Their tires were wider. Their bodies were completely covered. No markings, no license plates visible from a distance. He had spent 30 years driving military cargo. According to him, the trucks looked familiar. Officials denied any military involvement. The statement was direct. No armed forces are operating inside the restricted zone. For many people, that should have ended the speculation. Instead, it created another contradiction. If there was no military activity, who was driving the convoys? A few nights later, another witness stepped forward. She lived on a hillside overlooking part of the forest. From her bedroom window, she claimed she could see powerful white lights sweeping across the trees. Not flashlights, not vehicle headlights, floodlights. The kind normally used at large construction sites. She watched them move for nearly 3 hours. Then, just before dawn, every light went out at the same moment, as if someone had given a single command. The following morning, helicopters circled above the area. Not news helicopters. No media logos, no visible cameras. They flew low over the trees before disappearing into the clouds. Again, authorities refused to comment. Online investigators began comparing satellite images taken before and after the closure. Some claimed new clearings had appeared deep inside the forest. Others believed temporary roads had been built beneath the tree canopy. A few users even suggested that several small structures had appeared where none existed before. Independent analysts argued over every image. Some called them proof, others called them optical illusions. Nothing could be confirmed. Then, something even stranger happened. A freelance photographer uploaded several high-resolution images taken from a distant hill. One photograph appeared to show dozens of portable floodlights arranged in a large circle deep inside the forest. Hours later, the images vanished from every account where they had been posted. The photographer claimed he never deleted them. Friends insisted they had seen the pictures. Yet no copies could be found. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some believed authorities were excavating an archaeological site. Others suspected a hazardous material cleanup. A few imagined a hidden military bunker dating back to the Cold War. Each theory explained part of the mystery. None explained all of it. If dangerous chemicals had been discovered, why continue operations for months? If ancient ruins had been found, why involve so many security personnel? If it was military, why deny it so strongly? Then another report surfaced. A delivery driver claimed he had accidentally reached a temporary checkpoint while taking a wrong turn. Instead of ordinary police officers, he described heavily equipped personnel wearing uniforms without visible insignias. They inspected his vehicle, checked his identification, ordered him to leave immediately. When he later returned with local police to show them the checkpoint, it was gone. No barriers, no tents, no vehicles, only an empty forest road. Some dismissed his story as imagination. Others believed he had stumbled onto something he was never meant to see. Meanwhile, construction suppliers in nearby towns quietly reported unusually large orders: portable generators, industrial lighting, fuel, temporary fencing, communication equipment. None of the companies would reveal who placed the orders. Every invoice was listed under government contracts. Perfectly legal, perfectly ordinary, yet strangely impossible to trace. As weeks passed, one detail became impossible to ignore. No workers were ever seen entering during daylight. Almost every reported convoy arrived after sunset. Almost every vehicle left before sunrise. Whatever was happening inside the forest, it appeared to prefer darkness. Then came the rumor that changed everything. A volunteer, who had briefly worked near the restricted zone, agreed to speak. Not publicly, not under his real name. He refused to show his face. He accepted only one condition. One part of his story could never be recorded. He claimed that what frightened him most was not what he saw, it was what he heard. And according to him, the forest was making sounds that no one could explain. Nearly a year after the forest was sealed, an anonymous interview appeared online. The man's face was hidden in shadow. His voice had been digitally altered. No name was given. The interviewer introduced him only as a former volunteer who had worked near the restricted zone during the first weeks of the operation. Many people assumed it was another internet hoax, until he began describing details that had never been made public. He said he was not a police officer. He was not a soldier. He had been part of a civilian support team delivering supplies to the outer checkpoints. Food, medical equipment, batteries, fuel. He never expected to enter the forest itself. But one evening, everything changed. A vehicle broke down several kilometers beyond the main barricade. He and two mechanics were asked to drive in with replacement parts. They were told the repair would take less than an hour. Instead, they remained inside until sunrise. When asked what happened, the witness paused for several seconds. Then he answered quietly. The forest never sounded empty. At first, he believed it was ordinary wildlife. Branches moving, leaves rustling, wind between the trees. But the sounds slowly became stranger. He heard footsteps, slow, heavy, always behind them. Whenever the group stopped walking, the footsteps stopped too. Whenever they started moving again, the footsteps returned. No one ever found their source. The mechanics joked that someone was following them. The police escort did not laugh. Instead, the escort ordered everyone to remain close together. No one questioned the instruction. As darkness settled over the forest, the witness noticed another strange detail. Voices. Not loud, not screaming, just quiet conversations drifting through the trees. He could never understand the words. Sometimes they sounded close enough to touch. Other times they seemed impossibly far away. The police searched with flashlights. Nothing was there. One officer whispered that he had heard the same voices the night before. No official report mentioned them. Then the witness described something that caught the interviewer's attention. Their compasses stopped working. Not completely. The needles simply refused to settle. They turned slowly in endless circles. Electronic navigation performed no better. GPS units constantly shifted position by hundreds of meters. One device claimed they were standing outside the forest. Another insisted they were deep inside it. Everyone was together. Every screen showed something different. The witness admitted he assumed the equipment was broken, until he looked at the map. The road they had driven in on was gone. Not physically, the road was still beneath the vehicle, but every digital map showed empty woodland. It was as if the road had never existed. The interviewer asked whether anyone else noticed. The witness nodded. The police escort became visibly nervous. He ordered everyone to stop discussing navigation. Just keep moving. Just follow the vehicle. No explanations. No questions. Hours later, while waiting for the repair to finish, the witness wandered only a few steps away from the trucks. He noticed a line of trees illuminated by floodlights. Between them stood what looked like a person, perfectly still. Watching. The witness called to one of the officers. The officer looked in the same direction. I don't see anyone. The witness pointed again. There. The officer slowly lowered his flashlight. Get back to the truck. No investigation, no search. No attempt to identify the figure. Only those 4 words. Get back to the truck. The witness obeyed immediately. A few minutes later, the figure was gone. No footprints were found the following morning. Then came the question that everyone wanted answered. What frightened you enough to remain silent for so many years? The witness took a long breath. He looked toward the floor. Even with his face hidden, his hesitation was obvious. Finally, he replied, "It wasn't what I saw. It was what answered me." The interviewer asked what he meant. The witness refused. He shook his head. He repeated the condition he had made before the interview began. One detail would never be recorded. One detail would never be spoken aloud. Not because it was classified, because he believed repeating it would bring people back to the forest. The interview ended moments later. Viewers were left with more questions than answers. Many dismissed the witness as an actor. Others believed every word. Investigators searched for clues in the recording, background noises, editing cuts, voice patterns. Nothing proved the interview was genuine. Nothing proved it was fake. But just as debate reached its peak, historians uncovered forgotten documents stored in a regional archive. The papers described a settlement that had once stood exactly where the sealed forest now grew. The village had vanished from maps centuries earlier, and according to those records, people had been disappearing there long before the first police barricade was ever built. The anonymous interview reignited public interest. For months, people had focused on the police operation. Now, researchers began asking a different question. What if the mystery had not started with the rescue team? What if it had begun centuries earlier? A local historian decided to search the regional archives. Most of the documents were ordinary: tax records, land surveys, church registries. Then he found something unexpected. A map drawn more than 300 years ago. It showed a small settlement in the exact area where the sealed forest now stood. The village had a name, yet no modern map included it. Curious, the historian searched for more records. He discovered that the settlement had disappeared from official documents within a single generation. There was no record of a battle, no epidemic, no fire, no order to abandon the land. It was simply gone. Even stranger, nearby villages continued to exist. Only this one had vanished. Church records mentioned families who lived there. Births were recorded. Marriages were recorded. Then, suddenly, every entry stopped. No explanation followed. One handwritten note caught the historian's attention. The ink had faded with time, but several words remained readable. Do not enter after sunset. No reason was written beside the warning. At first, historians assumed it was folklore. Many old villages carried legends meant to keep children away from dangerous places. But another document suggested something more unusual. A traveler passing through the region in the early 18th century described hearing bells ringing from a village he could never find. He followed the sound through the forest until nightfall. By morning, he claimed he had returned to the same crossroads where he had started. His journal ended with a single sentence: "The trees remember more than men." No one knew what he meant. Years later, another account appeared. A merchant reported that one of his assistants disappeared while crossing the forest. Search parties found his horse. They found his wagon. They found every crate of supplies untouched. The assistant was never found. The official report blamed wolves, but there were no signs of an attack. No blood, no torn clothing, nothing. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Every few decades, someone vanished. Sometimes a traveler, sometimes a hunter, sometimes a woodcutter. The incidents were rare enough to be forgotten, until the next one occurred. As forests expanded over the abandoned settlement, the stories slowly faded into local legend. Children were warned not to wander too far. Older residents avoided certain paths after dark. Most people laughed at the tales, until the modern police operation made them seem relevant again. Interest grew quickly. Archaeologists requested permission to investigate the site. Surprisingly, permission was granted. For a brief period, a small excavation began inside the restricted zone. Researchers hoped to uncover the remains of the lost village. Initial findings were ordinary: stone foundations, fragments of pottery, iron tools. Everything matched expectations. Then the excavation stopped. Without warning, the equipment was removed, the research tents disappeared. No final report was released. The project simply ended. Several archaeologists later declined interviews. One admitted only that they had been instructed not to discuss the work. Another refused to answer any questions at all. Their silence fueled even more speculation. Some believed ancient human remains had been discovered. Others imagined hidden tunnels beneath the forest floor. A few suggested the excavation had uncovered something so unexpected that the government intervened. There was no evidence for those claims, only unanswered questions. Researchers attempted to obtain excavation records through public information requests. Many requests were denied. Others received heavily redacted documents with entire pages blacked out. The official explanation cited security concerns. Security concerns? For a centuries-old archaeological site? That phrase puzzled experts. What possible threat could ancient ruins still pose today? One satellite image added another layer to the mystery. It appeared to show a perfectly circular clearing hidden beneath the forest canopy. Some analysts argued it was a natural formation. Others believed it matched the location of the forgotten settlement shown on the old map. No one could verify it. Dense trees concealed almost everything. The deeper investigators looked into the forest's past, the less ordinary it became. The rescue team's disappearance no longer seemed like an isolated event. Instead, it appeared to be the newest chapter in a story stretching back hundreds of years. But history alone could not explain the strange equipment failures, the disappearing signals, or the anonymous witness who claimed something had answered him in the darkness. To understand those mysteries, investigators began comparing every possible explanation: natural phenomena, secret military activity, psychological effects, ancient underground structures, and one possibility that almost no expert was willing to discuss publicly. The next stage of the investigation would separate evidence from speculation and reveal why no single theory could explain everything. By now, the mystery had grown far beyond one missing camper. One rescue team had vanished. A forest remained closed. Historical records hinted at disappearances stretching back centuries. Equipment had failed without a clear explanation. Witnesses disagreed about what they had seen. The evidence existed. The explanation did not. Investigators divided into competing camps. Each believed they had solved the mystery. Each could explain some of the facts. None could explain all of them. The first theory was the simplest: a natural phenomenon. Some geologists pointed out that certain areas can contain unusual magnetic minerals beneath the ground. Large deposits of magnetite can interfere with compasses. Electrical disturbances can occasionally affect sensitive equipment. If such a formation existed beneath the forest, it might explain the spinning compass needles. It might even account for unreliable GPS readings. But there was a problem. Magnetic interference cannot erase footprints. It cannot explain abandoned equipment. And it certainly cannot account for centuries of disappearances. The theory answered one question, while leaving several others untouched. The second theory focused underground. Old military engineers examined historical maps and noticed something interesting. The region had once been strategically important. Some believed forgotten tunnel systems could still exist beneath the forest. Collapsed passages, hidden bunkers, underground chambers. If rescue teams unknowingly crossed unstable ground, they might have fallen into concealed cavities. That could explain why people vanished without obvious signs. It sounded convincing, until survey crews examined the surrounding terrain. No major sinkholes, no collapse patterns, no evidence of large underground structures directly beneath the reported locations. Again, part of the mystery fit. The rest remained unanswered. The third theory attracted the most attention online: a secret government operation. Supporters pointed to the nighttime convoys, the floodlights, the heavily guarded checkpoints, the missing satellite imagery. They argued that authorities were hiding classified research, perhaps experimental technology, perhaps hazardous materials, perhaps something connected to national security. It explained the secrecy, but not the history. Why would government records from 300 years ago contain similar disappearances? Why would forgotten maps describe the same area long before modern technology existed? The timeline simply did not fit. Another group looked at the human mind instead of the forest. Psychologists proposed that isolation, fear, exhaustion, and poor visibility could distort perception. People might misinterpret ordinary sounds. Stress could create conflicting memories. Groups under pressure sometimes experience shared confusion. This explanation made sense for the anonymous witness. It even explained why two rescuers could describe different things while looking in the same direction. But it could not explain corrupted recordings, or synchronized equipment failures, or why experienced rescue professionals suddenly lost confidence in familiar navigation. Then came the oldest explanation of all. Local folklore. Long before police barricades, long before rescue teams, villagers had warned travelers about one particular section of the forest. Not because of wolves, not because of bandits, but because, according to the stories, the forest changed. Paths never stayed where they belonged. Sounds traveled in impossible directions. People followed voices they believed belonged to friends, only to discover they had wandered alone for hours. Modern investigators dismissed these stories as myths, yet some details sounded strangely familiar. Moving paths, confusing directions. Voices without visible people, legends and witness accounts seemed to echo one another across centuries. Still, stories are not evidence. They cannot replace facts. Researchers continued comparing every report, piece by piece, fact by fact. A pattern slowly emerged. No single explanation survived every test. Natural causes explained the navigation problems. Psychology explained conflicting witness accounts. Government secrecy explained the restricted access. History explained why the mystery seemed much older than the rescue operation. Each theory solved one corner of the puzzle. None completed the picture. Then an unexpected discovery changed the discussion entirely. A retired communications engineer contacted investigators. During the first weeks of the police operation, he had been monitoring emergency radio frequencies from his home. Quite by accident, he had recorded something. At first, he assumed it was ordinary rescue traffic. Months later, after hearing reports about the missing team, he replayed the old recording. One transmission made him stop the tape. He listened again and again. There was a voice on the recording that no official log had ever mentioned. A calm voice, clear, unfamiliar. It spoke only one short sentence. According to the engineer, that sentence had never been released to the public. When news of the recording spread, experts immediately questioned its authenticity. Some believed it was edited. Others insisted it was genuine. Authorities refused to confirm or deny its existence. If the recording was real, it might become the most important piece of evidence ever connected to the sealed forest. And if it was fake, someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to make it believable. The next chapter would examine that mysterious recording and the words that continue to divide investigators to this day. The recording appeared without warning. It was uploaded to a small online forum late one evening. The title was simple: Forest Rescue Channel, Unreleased Audio. The file lasted just under 4 minutes. There was no description, no explanation, no source. At first, almost no one noticed it. Then, someone recognized one of the call signs. It matched the emergency service used during the week the forest was sealed. Within hours, thousands of people were listening. The first minute sounded completely ordinary. Static, routine radio checks, weather updates, equipment reports. Exactly what you would expect during a rescue operation. Then, the tone changed. One rescuer reported that visibility had suddenly dropped. The command center replied that satellite weather showed clear skies. The rescuer insisted they could barely see 20 meters ahead. The dispatcher repeated the forecast. No fog, no rain, no storm. Both sides were describing completely different conditions. A minute later, another voice entered the conversation. The speaker identified himself as part of the same rescue team. His breathing was heavy. He said they had reached a clearing that did not appear on their maps. The dispatcher checked every available chart. No clearing existed in that location. The rescuer sounded confused. He insisted he was standing in open ground. He could see the sky above him. Yet every satellite image showed dense forest. The command center ordered the team to mark their position and stay together. For several seconds, only static filled the recording. Then came the sentence that made the audio famous. A calm voice spoke clearly through the radio. It did not sound frightened. It did not sound rushed. It simply said, "Don't follow the voices." The dispatcher immediately asked who had spoken. No one answered. Every member of the rescue team denied making the transmission. The command center checked the active radio list. Every registered unit had already identified itself. There should not have been another voice. Yet the recording clearly contained one. Investigators later argued over what listeners had actually heard. Some believed it was an unknown rescuer. Others suggested radio interference had combined two separate conversations. Audio engineers cleaned the recording. They reduced the static, removed background noise, enhanced the speech. The mysterious sentence remained. Its tone never changed. Its words never changed. No hidden edits were found. Still, that did not prove the recording was authentic. It only proved the sentence existed in the file. The final minute became even stranger. The rescue leader reported hearing footsteps approaching from behind. He ordered everyone to remain still. No one moved. The footsteps continued. Closer. Slower. Then they stopped. The dispatcher asked what they could see. The answer came almost as a whisper. Nothing. Seconds later, another rescuer interrupted. He claimed someone was walking between the trees. The rescue leader insisted there was no one there. Two people, standing only meters apart, describing completely different scenes. Then the radios erupted with static. Voices overlapped. Words became impossible to understand. One by one, every signal disappeared. The recording ended with an empty channel. No goodbye, no distress call, just silence. Within days, experts from several universities examined the file. Some concluded it showed no obvious signs of digital manipulation. Others warned that modern editing software could create convincing imitations. Without the original recording, certainty was impossible. Government officials were repeatedly asked about the leak. They declined to comment. Not once. Not twice. Every request received the same reply. We do not discuss ongoing investigations. That answer solved nothing. Instead, it intensified the debate. If the recording was fabricated, dismissing it would have been easy. If it was genuine, confirming it would have revealed sensitive details. By refusing both options, authorities left the mystery alive. The leaked audio became one of the most discussed pieces of evidence connected to the forest. Some listeners heard only frightened rescuers, caught in confusing conditions. Others believed the recording captured something far more unusual. But before accepting any extraordinary explanation, investigators decided to compare every known fact: verified evidence, witness testimony, historical records, rumors, online theories. Only by separating them could they answer the biggest question of all. Was there truly something hidden inside the forest? Or had ordinary events slowly transformed into one of Europe's greatest modern mysteries? After months of investigation, thousands of online discussions, and countless theories, one fact became impossible to ignore. The mystery had grown far larger than the evidence. Stories had spread faster than verified information. Rumors had filled the silence left by official statements. To understand what really happened, investigators began separating every claim into four categories: verified facts, unverified claims, rumors, theories. Only then did the picture become clearer. The verified facts were surprisingly few. A section of forest was officially closed. Access was restricted. Emergency services operated in the area. Authorities released very little information. Those facts could be confirmed. Everything beyond them became increasingly uncertain. Next came the witness statements. Several people independently described unusual navigation problems. Some reported conflicting compass readings. Others claimed GPS devices behaved unpredictably. These accounts were consistent with one another, but they remained personal testimony. Without technical data, they could not be treated as proof. Then there were the historical records. Old maps did indicate that forgotten settlements had once existed in many European forests. Archived journals contained stories of travelers becoming lost. However, historians warned against taking centuries-old folklore as literal evidence. Legends often grow with every generation. They preserve fear, not necessarily facts. The leaked recording remained one of the most debated pieces of evidence. Audio specialists could not agree on whether it was authentic. Some found no obvious edits. Others argued that the source could never be verified. Without the original emergency archive, certainty was impossible. The anonymous witness faced the same problem. His story contained details that sounded believable, but no independent evidence confirmed his identity. No official documents placed him inside the operation. His interview remained exactly what it was: a claim, not proof. Then investigators asked a different question. Instead of searching for the most exciting explanation, what explanation required the fewest assumptions? Several experts proposed a combination of ordinary events: dense forest, poor visibility, difficult terrain, navigation errors, equipment limitations, stress, fear, miscommunication. Each factor alone was manageable. Together, they could create extraordinary confusion. Search and rescue professionals know that forests can distort distance, direction, and sound. Voices may seem much closer than they are. Footsteps echo unpredictably. Landmarks appear different from unfamiliar angles. Under pressure, even experienced teams can lose confidence. This explanation accounted for many reported experiences, but not all of them. It did not explain why access remained restricted for so long. It did not explain the persistent secrecy, and it certainly did not explain why so many details were never publicly clarified. That gap became the true mystery. Not monsters, not ghosts, not hidden creatures, the absence of reliable information. Whenever facts are scarce, imagination rushes in to fill the empty space. That is how legends begin. A missing answer becomes a story becomes folklore. Folklore becomes certainty, even when no certainty exists. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the sealed forest is not about what was hidden inside. It is about how quickly mystery grows when silence replaces explanation. Could there have been an undisclosed environmental hazard? Possibly. Could classified government activity have overlapped with an ordinary rescue operation? Also possible. Could unrelated historical legends have become attached to modern events? History offers many examples of exactly that. Each possibility explains part of the puzzle. None explains every piece. And that is precisely why the story refuses to disappear. Because the strongest mysteries are not built on impossible evidence. They are built on incomplete evidence. One unanswered question after another. One missing document after another. One unexplained decision after another. Years later, researchers still return to the same conclusion. There is no single verified explanation for everything associated with the sealed forest. Only fragments, only possibilities, only questions. Yet one final mystery remains. The barricades are still there. The warning signs have faded beneath rain and snow. Trees continue growing around abandoned fences. Nature is slowly reclaiming every trace of the investigation. If the operation ended long ago, why has the forest never fully reopened? That final question has no official answer. And it leads directly to the last chapter of the story. Years have passed. The news cameras are gone. The reporters have moved on. Online discussions have slowed. But the forest is still there, standing quietly behind aging barricades. The warning signs have faded. Paint has peeled away. Steel fences are covered with moss. Nature has begun reclaiming every trace of the investigation. To a passing traveler, the entrance looks abandoned, almost forgotten. Yet local residents say the restrictions never completely disappeared. Some paths remain blocked. Others simply end at locked gates. The silence that first surrounded the forest has never truly lifted. Every few months, another photograph appears online. A distant light between the trees. An empty road leading toward the old checkpoints. Fresh tire tracks where no vehicles are supposed to be. Most images can never be verified. Some are quickly explained, others remain unresolved. Modern satellite imagery shows nothing extraordinary. From above, the forest looks like countless others across Europe. A sea of green stretching to the horizon. No hidden buildings, no massive excavations, no obvious secrets. If something unusual ever existed there, the landscape no longer reveals it. Researchers continue studying the historical records, the forgotten settlement, the travelers' journals, the old warnings passed down through generations. Some historians believe these stories reflect ordinary dangers that became exaggerated over time. Others argue that local folklore often preserves memories of real events, even when the details become distorted. The truth may lie somewhere between the two. Search and rescue experts still use the case as a reminder of how quickly difficult terrain can overwhelm even experienced teams. Dense forests can confuse navigation. Stress can alter perception. Communication can break down when people need it most. Those are real lessons. They require no supernatural explanation. At the same time, unanswered questions remain. Why were so many details never released? Why did witnesses describe similar experiences despite never meeting one another? Why did official statements remain so limited for so long? Perhaps there were legal reasons. Perhaps there were operational reasons. Or perhaps the authorities simply believed that silence would prevent unnecessary panic. Ironically, it had the opposite effect. The lack of answers created one of the internet's most enduring modern mysteries. Every year, Curious visitors still travel to the region. Most never find the exact location described in online stories. Some discover only ordinary woodland. Others return convinced that something still feels different. Their experiences vary. Their conclusions rarely agree. And that may be the most important detail of all. The forest means something different to everyone who studies it. To scientists, it is a case of incomplete evidence. To historians, it is a forgotten chapter of regional history. To investigators, it is an unfinished file. To storytellers, it is the perfect mystery. Because perfect mysteries are never completely solved. They survive because one final question always remains. So let us separate the story one last time. Verified facts. A forest was restricted. Emergency operations took place. Authorities released limited information. Claims. Witnesses described strange navigation problems and unexplained sounds. Rumors. Secret military activity. Hidden tunnels. Classified discoveries. And mysterious figures in the trees. Theories. Natural magnetic interference. Human error under extreme stress. Forgotten underground structures. Or a combination of ordinary events that gradually became extraordinary through silence and speculation. None of these explanations answers every question. Perhaps no explanation ever will. And maybe that is why people continue talking about the forest long after the barricades first appeared. Because the greatest mysteries are not the ones that give us impossible answers. They are the ones that leave us with impossible questions. So before this story ends, consider one final thought. If there was truly nothing unusual inside that forest, why has no one ever provided a complete explanation for what happened there? Maybe the answer is ordinary. Maybe it is extraordinary. Or maybe it is still waiting somewhere beyond the trees.